Big day today in the economic calendar. The Fed keeps the rates unchanged at the FOMC meeting. And now we are going to listen to Jay Powell's press conference. Let's have a look.
And what at least was done in this first paragraph is back to the two double mandates.
We're about to find out. Here's Jay Powell.
Good afternoon. My colleagues and I remain squarely focused on achieving our dual mandate goals of maximum employment and stable prices for the benefit of the American people. Our economy has made considerable progress toward both goals over the past 2 years. The labor market has come into better balance, and the unemployment rate remains low. Inflation has eased substantially from a peak of 7% to 2.5%. We are strongly committed to returning inflation to our 2% goal in support of a strong economy that benefits everyone. Today, the FOMC decided to leave our policy interest rate unchanged and to continue to reduce our securities holdings. We are maintaining our restrictive stance of monetary policy in order to keep demand in line with supply and reduce inflationary pressures. We are attentive to risks on both sides of our dual mandate, and I will have more to say about monetary policy after briefly reviewing economic developments. Recent indicators suggest that economic activity has continued to expand at a solid pace. GDP growth moderated to 2.1% in the first half of the year, down from 3.1% last year.
NASDAQ is loving it.
Private domestic final purchases, or PDFP, which excludes inventory investment, government spending, and net exports, and usually sends a clearer signal of underlying demand, grew at a 2.6% pace over that same period, the first half. Growth of consumer spending has slowed from last year's robust pace, but remains solid. Investment in equipment and intangibles has picked up from its anemic pace last year. In the housing sector, investment stalled in the second quarter after a strong rise in the first. Improving supply conditions have supported resilient demand and the strong performance of the U.S. economy over the past year. In the labor market, supply and demand conditions have come into better balance. Payroll job gains averaged 177,000 jobs per month in the second quarter, a solid pace, but below that seen in the first quarter. The unemployment rate has moved up, but remains low at 4.1%. Strong job creation over the past couple of years has been accompanied by an increase in the supply of workers, reflecting increases in participation among individuals aged 25 to 54 years, and a strong pace of immigration. Nominal wage growth has eased over the past year, and the jobs-to-workers gap has narrowed. Overall, a broad set of indicators suggest that conditions in the labor market have returned to about where they stood on the eve of the pandemic, strong but not overheated. Inflation has eased notably over the past 2 years, but remains somewhat above our longer-run goal of 2%. Total PCE prices rose 2.5% over the 12 months ending in June. Excluding the volatile food and energy categories, core PCE prices rose 2.6%. Longer-term inflation expectations appear to remain well anchored, as reflected in a broad range of surveys of households and businesses and forecasters, as well as measures from financial markets. My colleagues and I are acutely aware that high inflation imposes significant hardship as it erodes purchasing power, especially for those least able to meet the higher costs of essentials like food, housing, and transportation. Our monetary policy actions are guided by our dual mandate to promote maximum employment and stable prices for the American people. In support of these goals, the committee decided at today's meeting to maintain the target range for the federal funds rate at 5.25% to 5.5%, and to continue reducing our securities holdings. As the labor market has cooled and inflation has declined, the risks to achieving our employment and inflation goals continue to move into better balance. Indeed, we're attentive to the risks to both sides of our dual mandate. We have stated that we do not expect it will be appropriate to reduce the target range for the federal funds rate until we have gained greater confidence that inflation is moving sustainably toward 2%. The second quarter's inflation readings have added to our confidence, and more good data would further strengthen that confidence. We will continue to make our decisions meeting by meeting We know that reducing policy restraint too soon or too much could result in a reversal of the progress we have seen on inflation. At the same time, reducing policy restraint too late or too little could unduly weaken economic activity and employment. In considering any adjustments to the target range for the federal funds rate, the committee will carefully assess incoming data, the evolving outlook, and the balance of risks. As the economy evolves, monetary policy will adjust in order to best promote our maximum employment and price stability goals. If the economy remains solid and inflation persists, we can maintain the current target range for the federal funds rate as long as appropriate. If the labor market were to weaken unexpectedly or inflation were to fall more quickly than anticipated, we are prepared to respond. Policy is well positioned to deal with the risks and uncertainties that we face in pursuing both sides of our dual mandate. The Fed has been assigned two goals for monetary policy: maximum employment and stable prices. We remain committed to bringing inflation back down to our 2% goal and to keeping longer-term inflation expectations well anchored. Restoring price stability is essential to achieving maximum employment and stable prices over the longer run. Our success in delivering on these goals matters to all Americans. We understand that our actions affect communities, families, and businesses across the country. Everything we do is in service to our public mission. We at the Fed will do everything we can to achieve our maximum employment and price stability goals. Thank you. I look forward to your questions.
Gina.
Gina Smilik from the New York Times. Thanks for taking our questions. Markets pretty much entirely expect a rate cut in September at this stage. I wonder if you think that's a reasonable expectation, and if so, why not just make the move today?
Thank you. So on September, let me say this. We have made no decisions about future meetings, and that includes the September meeting. The broad sense of the committee is that the economy is moving closer to the point at which it will be appropriate to reduce our policy rate. In that, we will be data dependent, but not data point dependent. So it will not be a question of responding specifically to one or two data releases. The question will be whether the totality of the data, the evolving outlook, and the balance of risks are consistent with rising confidence on inflation and maintaining a solid labor market. If that test is met, a reduction in our policy rate could be on the table as soon as the next meeting in September. So you asked why not today, and I would just say, again, that the broad sense of the committee is that we're getting closer to the point at which it will be appropriate to reduce our policy rate, but that we're not quite at that point yet.
All right, folks, I want to bring back Daniel DiMartino, Booth, Allen McCartney. We're here taking notes and just chattering away as we listen to this. Jay Powell just said what I started this show off with. All data points are in a direction that we want to see. So, Ali, this keeps bringing up the question, why wait? Why wait? It's been asked 2 or 3 times in 2 or 3 different ways, and he really hasn't given a concrete answer other than I don't want to be Arthur Burns. What's he?
All right, so overall, it seemed that Jay Powell seemed a little bit uneasy in this meeting, I mean, compared to the other ones. But anyway, nothing has changed, and the rate remains unchanged for the Fed. And of course, you know, if you watch the press conference, you get the feeling that, yes, they are stuck between a rock and a hard place. They cannot lower rates because inflation is still a problem, and it looks, I guess, for them that inflation is still something they have to worry about. And of course, everybody is asking them, well, why don't you cut? Why don't you cut? Look, the job market is softening. The economy is softening. It's time to cut rates. But of course, for him, the most dangerous thing would be for his legacy, you know, would be inflation going back up for another inflation cycle like the 70s, which would absolutely ruin the U.S. economy if we were to see another round of rate hikes. It would be a guaranteed recession or even worse at this point. And so now, you know, everybody's talking about a September rate cut, but, you know, if you go back to the beginning of the year, everybody was saying, well, the market was anticipating 6 or 7 rate cuts cuts by the end of the year, and none of that happened. We are now in July, almost August. We have 0 rate cuts, and at the September meeting, we'll see what they will announce. But my guess is that there's not going to be any rate cut in September. Now, I might be wrong. They might go and do one. But if they do, then and nothing has changed, if the situation sort of stays the same, then they're going to bring a real risk of having inflation come back. So I don't think they're going to take this risk. And if you really think about it, for the Fed, if the soft landing, the scenario where they're perfectly adjust the rates so that it totally matches the economic circumstances, which basically is something that's impossible. And, you have to fall on either on one side or the other. Either you're going to be too early or you're going to be too late. Either you're going to send inflation back up or you're going to send the economy into a recession. And, in this scenario, if you're going to have to choose between one or the other, if you're going to choose between inflation or recession, you're going to choose recession if you're the Fed, obviously, because inflation has been such a problem for the last 4 years. And your mandate, your mission has been to get rid of this inflation. You're not going to be too early to cut rates and bring another inflation cycle when you can have a recession. And the answer to the recession is very simple. You just print more money like you've been doing for the last 10 years. And you know how to do that well. And you know how to bring the economy back online by just printing money. It's the easy solution. So why would you go with the bad solution, the most difficult solution, cutting rates early, sending back in another inflation cycle, and sending the economy in sort of a totally unknown territory, things that we haven't seen for like 30 or 40 years, which would be dramatic for the country. Now we'll see. For today anyway, rates are unchanged. A lot of talk by Powell. Maybe you get a rate cut in September, maybe you don't. He didn't really try to give any indication that it would be a positive. And the reason for that is that even if he was thinking about a rate cut in September, just telegraphing it would be exactly a case against the rate cut, right? If he says now, oh, I'm going to cut rates in September, and the market shoots up and inflation goes back up, then he cannot cut rates in September. So we will see ultimately, but the no indication of a rate cut is not something that I would think would be bullish, and yet the market is taking it as a win. But the market has been sort of taking all the news as positive for the last year. So eventually, if none of the things that the market thought were the positive news are going to turn out, then we're going to have some kind of repricing. Anyway, thank you for watching this video. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you on the next one.
Hit me with that like and